All right. No, we need to go to the Zoom. Record. All right. Well, hello, survivors. We're glad to be coming at you this evening, March 13th, with our SRVIVRS Inspires, having Mike Oster here with us tonight. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So we're sitting in the same town, probably only a couple miles away, because only in Rapid City, there's not anything more than 15 miles away from each other here in Rapid. So we're in the same town here tonight, but glad to be joined with Mike. He is a very busy individual. I've been trying to tag him down for a few months now, but he's got a lot of responsibilities and a lot of action that he has in his life. So we're honored to have him tonight with us for our SRVIVRS Inspires. And Mike and I, we're fairly new in our, if you want to call it our relationship. We've met a few times in the last few months, but I met Mike or heard from Mike first in what we call a Day of Excellence here in Rapid City. I take my office and we attend this Day of Excellence, which has a bunch of motivational speakers, some comedians at times, and some great stories to inspire us to be our more excellent self. And maybe Mike, you can tell us a little bit more about how that came to be in just a moment, but that's where I first saw or experienced Mike. He was emceeing an event, I believe, and ended up speaking, I think, the year after. But clearly someone with some leadership skills and a very comfortable being in front of people and delivering a powerful message. And I ended up getting his book. It starts with attitude. And I like that it's got the stars on there in terms of his military service. It's reflective of what he's done in the military a bit. So with that, Mike, I'd like to just have you turn it over to you and tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe put a little plug in there about what that Day of Excellence is and what got you to where you're at right now.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Joshua, and I would call it a relationship, and I'm very pleased for that, and feel blessed that we got together and got a chance to know each other, and really looking forward to working with you on some other things that we've got going on as well. So really a privilege for me to be here with this group tonight. I have to tell you, this was one of the most powerful things that Joshua shared with me that he's doing, is this organization that comes together and talks about not just surviving, but helping others survive and providing service, but also being served. And I just think that's an incredible gift to everybody that's part of it and everybody around it that's being impacted by it, some of whom don't even realize that they're being touched by it. So to be part of it is absolutely a privilege. So thank you for that opportunity. As far as I go, unfortunately, I started this business of understanding or dealing with surviving when I was 10 years old. I lost my oldest brother in a very tragic situation when he was a college student at the university playing intramural basketball, collapsed, ended up passing away. And at that time, this was in the late 70s, they were unable to determine a cause of death. And he was a very healthy individual, didn't really have any indicators that there was going to be anything like, something that would cause a situation where he would end up passing away. And so watching my parents go through that, my family go through that, and at 10 years old, it certainly was sad. I'm not sure I understood the gravity of the entire situation. For me, it was more impactful seeing all the other adults in the family. I was the youngest of 5 children at that time. And so just watching the entire family go through that, and the people that I never saw be emotional. I mean, I was the little kid that was always emotional. And so seeing them do that was very impactful. And as I got older, I started to understand or at least have an awareness that I could not comprehend what that would be like as a parent to lose a child. And then my other brother is much closer in age. They were a year and a half apart. So for him, it was much more traumatic at that time. And then just a few years later, I shouldn't say a few, about 10 years later, when I was in college, a young man that I grew up with, spent my entire life growing up with. In fact, at the time of his death, we were the student body president and vice president at the university that we were attending, and he was killed tragically in a car accident. And he was like a brother to me. And so at that time, it was more of a direct impact. I understood what was going on and had to deal with that. And then of course, I've lost both my parents. I lost my dad fairly young. I lost my mother about 10 years after that. But in the meantime, between those and losing your parents, that's the way things are supposed to happen. But not when you're as young as I was or as young as my dad was. But the other very tragic loss that I incurred was when I was about 39, another gentleman, and through the Guard, we become very close with the people we serve with. And two of my very close friends were in Hawaii scuba diving, and he died in a very tragic scuba diving accident. And so unfortunately, I've got some experience in this arena, not to the level that some of you do, and I'm not trying to imply that. I just want you to know that at some level, I understand part of what the impact of this is like. And so, and I know you're not supposed to measure tragedies, right? But some certainly seem worse than others. But just the fact that there's a group that comes together and deals with these things and talks about this, and looking back after actually Joshua and I visited, I probably recognized this, but didn't really realize that I recognized it, that you do start to deal with tragedy by either coordinating the funeral. I mean, that becomes something that takes a lot of time and energy, making sure everybody is notified. I mean, you become busy to deal with it. And then you become the person that other people lean on. So after my brother passed away when I was 10, about 4 years later, one of my classmates lost a brother. And I remember being her support mechanism for that and how good that made me feel, but having no idea the impact it had on her. And unfortunately, about a year ago, she lost another sibling, and I reached out to her, and she actually referenced the one when I was 14 that passed away, and what an impact it had on her. The point being that because I'd been through it, it meant a lot to her to, be there for her because she knew that I could relate. And so bringing this community together and doing what you do, I think epitomizes the fact that when we're trying to do good, when we're trying to spread that message of good, when we're trying to just understand, listen, support, be there, that creates a better atmosphere, and it creates a better culture and a better organization. And really, that's the epitome of what I believe we can do all the time. There doesn't have to be tragedy involved. There doesn't have to be something horrific that's happened for us to come together and do these kind of things. And unfortunately, we live in an incredibly negative world. You don't have to look very far on social media or the news or the newspaper or even in the community and listen to conversation to understand that there's a lot of negativity going on around us. And the other thing I think, as far as all of this tragedy and loss, some of it's very public, and we know people are going through this, but some of it is very private, and people are going through tragic things that we have no visibility of, or we don't understand, because we're not inside their world. We don't know what everybody's dealing with. But what I have found is almost everybody is dealing with something. And so anytime we have an opportunity to lift up rather than press down, I think we're better for it. And I know that they are better for it because they're getting the benefit of that. And so this old mindset of mine that it starts with attitude is really based on all of the things that are happening around us, whether it's a tragic loss or horrific incident or something that somebody's going through that we don't see. We can't control that. And the only thing at the end of the day that we can control is when something happens to us, the only thing we can control is how we react to it and what we do with that incident, event, or information that comes upon us. And many of us have not taken the time to realize that if we're not doing anything to try to control that for good, then we're going to default to negative, because that's what we're being trained. That's everything that we're being exposed to around us. So I subscribe to the fact that there are 4 types of fitness that we deal with. And Joshua is very familiar with one of those types of fitness, the physical part of physical fitness, in his move and memory and everything else that he's doing. That's exhausting just to watch, Joshua, but I applaud what you're doing. I think it's amazing. But that's certainly a type of fitness, physical fitness, right? And there's 3 other types. There's spiritual fitness, and that's between you and whatever your higher power is, but working diligently to try to grow that spiritual muscle, if you will. And then the other 2 are emotional and mental fitness. And because I'm a military guy, of course, I had to come up with an acronym for those 4 types of fitness. And the acronym is ESPM, not to be confused with our sports friends over at ESPN, but ESPM, so emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental fitness. And the spiritual between you and your higher power, whatever that is, the physical between you and your gym or your 100-mile runs or whatever it might be for the physical. But the mental and emotional pieces of fitness are the ones that are so incredibly important, but that we don't really have a gym that we can go to or a place that we can go to do mental and emotional fitness. At the end of the day, they are the two most important, and I shouldn't say that. Spiritual to me is the most important, but mental and emotional, if we're not doing those, it can have the greatest impact on everything else that we do. If you are mentally and emotionally not in the right place, it becomes hard to get out of bed and even go to the gym or the church or whatever the place is that you go for your spiritual side. In 36 years of service in the military, I had to take a lot of physical fitness tests because we have to take at least 1 or 2 a year to make sure that we're still physically fit to continue to serve. And I like to go to the gym. That's my place for physical fitness. And I can honestly say that in all those years of doing that, I never once was carried out of the gym on a stretcher because I had physically exhausted myself to the point where I couldn't go on, couldn't do another rep, couldn't do anything else, and had to be physically helped out of the gym. But I have walked out of the gym a number of times because mentally and emotionally, I decided to give up. I was either, exhausted from a stressful day, or there was something going on in my marital life or family life or personal life that was weighing down on my mental and emotional fitness. And so because we don't actively pursue trying to make those more fit, we're at greater risk of having those things have a negative impact on us. And what I have found is that we don't really need a gym. We don't need a mechanism. We just need to be cognizant of the fact that if we're doing nothing, we're atrophying in mental and emotional fitness. But if we are conscious of the fact that we have to make an effort to be strong in those two areas, then we're going to be better in the rest of our life. And so this whole business of It Starts With Attitude is simply making, the first part of it is understanding those 4 types of fitness, focusing in on the mental and emotional aspect of that. It might be reading, it might be meditation, it might be just, these kind of things where you're emotionally growing. That's where we grow our mental and emotional muscles. And if we're doing that, then we can start to understand that the only thing that we can control in life, when life happens, and it's going to happen, it's going to knock us down. It's not about whether it's going to knock us down. It's about how long are we going to stay down. And getting back up and getting back in the fight is about our attitude. And if our mental and emotional fitness, spiritual and physical fitness are all in check, it becomes much easier to go positive instead of negative when life happens. And so that's really the first part of this. It's all about attitude and making the decision to focus in on a positive attitude rather than negative attitude. And so understanding those types of fitness. The second thing I think about when it comes to this attitude business, the only thing we can control is our attitude. It's important to understand that we are going to have emotions. Emotions happen, and they are reactive, and there's nothing we can do about emotions. If you get cut off in traffic, you have an immediate emotion, right? It might be happy, but it's probably not. It's probably anger. And so you probably have an angry emotion. Doesn't make you a bad person. It's just what happens. It's what we do with that emotion that determines whether we're a good or bad person. And many people react with that emotion possibly in a negative way. They might wave at you with one finger. I don't know, but they're going to make a decision to do something based on that angry emotion. But if we're in a place where we have worked on our mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical fitness, it's much easier for us to take that emotion, even if it's a good emotion, because a positive emotion can also be destructive because we can get too high or too happy and think that things are too great, and then we're on the far end of the other spectrum. We want to live in this place where we understand that what we think is so terrible is maybe bad, but not so terrible. And what we think is so great is maybe good, but not so great. And that keeps us in this place where we're living, where we're not in such high and low peaks and valleys. And so our perception of what's happening around us is incredibly important as well. And if we are in a negative place when things happen, our perception is going to be negative. And so the story that I like to share is in my military career, it's very important militarily to be punctual, right? You should always be 10 or 15 minutes early for everything. And I have a tendency to take on too many things and not be super organized. And so I'm always kind of running from thing to thing, and I might always be a few minutes late. Well, this one particular day I was going from one place in Rapid City about 1.5 miles away. I had to go to a meeting. And as I'm leaving my office about 5 minutes before the meeting is supposed to start, and it's about a 10-minute drive, so I'm already in trouble, I come to a red light. And at the red light, there's a car in front of me, and we're both turning right. And apparently the person missed the day of driver's ed where you could find out that you could turn right on red. And as I looked at the person that was not turning right on red, it appeared to me, now this may have been perception, but it appeared to me that they had a cup of coffee in one hand, they had their cell phone on their shoulder, and they were smoking a cigarette that was out the window. They weren't going anywhere for a while, right? And so just about the time I was ready to lay on my horn and let this person know that you can turn right on red, I reminded myself that I'm having a perception here that because of my situation already being late that I've created, my perception is the person in front of me is not very smart and not going anywhere because they don't have any place to be, because clearly they're a bad person. And as I'm getting ready to lay on the horn, I remind myself about my perception is because of my negative attitude. It is possible, not probable, but it is possible that the person in front of me who is holding that cup of coffee and on that cell phone and smoking that cigarette may be having a very tragic experience right now. In fact, it could be that they're finding out very terrible news on their cell phone, and because of the stress, they're smoking the first cigarette they've ever had in their life. And that's the kind of day they're having. Now, that's probably not true, but it made me kind of giggle. And because of that, I wasn't in such a negative place. I didn't lay on my horn. I got to my meeting late, which I was going to be anyway. Nobody got fired, and life was okay. And it was simply an opportunity to take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at my perceptions. And what I've realized is that when we use perceptions to determine our attitude, whatever we think, we're probably wrong. Because I have no idea what was going on in that vehicle in front of me. I have no idea who that person was. I've never met him and I'll never meet him. But I'm making all these decisions in my head. And if I'm in a negative place, I'm perceiving for negative. If I'm in a positive or neutral or positive place, I perceive for positive. Either way, I'm probably wrong. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to have thoughts and I'm going to be wrong, I want to be wrong for good instead of evil. Because whatever I do is not going to impact that person's day, but it's going to impact mine. And even though I was still late for my meeting, I had a better day because I didn't make a negative choice. I didn't lash out at that person, and I didn't go negative in my mind. Because the after effects of those decisions of positive or negative, they stay with us for the rest of the day. And they accumulate throughout the day. And so by making that positive choice at that time, I was more able to make a positive choice when the next thing happened in the day. Because again, life's going to happen. And this whole attitude thing, life's going to happen all day, every day. And every day we get to make attitude choices. In fact, all of us made an attitude choice this morning. And it was a little tougher this morning than it is in most mornings, because in most places we sprung ahead and lost an hour of sleep. Now, the really smart, organized people went to bed an hour earlier because they knew they were going to lose that hour. But the rest of us all went to bed at the normal time and maybe even a little later because it's a Saturday night, and we lost that hour of sleep. So this morning's attitude choice was a little tougher. But every morning we make an attitude choice. Is it a good morning, God, or good God, it's morning? And so that's the first choice we make every day. And all we're doing is telling ourselves what kind of day we're going to have. And that self-talk is so incredibly important. Chad Helmstetter is an author that wrote a book called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, which I think is a fantastic title because we're all talking to ourselves. And I've realized that it's okay to talk to yourself. It's just a little bit troublesome if you start answering yourself. But in that book about what to say when you talk to yourself, he tells us that 77% of the time when we self-talk, we talk negative. That means we're telling ourselves negative things throughout the day, 77% of the time. And he also tells us that by the time a young person is 18 years old, they've heard the words can't and no 148,000 times. Those are two very negative words in the English language, particularly can't. And Henry Ford told us a long time ago that whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're absolutely right. There's so much truth and power in that, because when we're negative self-talking, our subconscious mind is helping us make that come true. So when I tell myself I can't do something, my subconscious mind, which is the part of my mind that makes me blink and breathe that I don't really control, it's starting to go to work to make the things I believe come true. If I tell my subconscious mind that there's never enough money at the end of the month, my subconscious mind helps me make sure that continues to be true. If I tell myself that I'm super exhausted at 2 o'clock and I need a Diet Coke, then my subconscious mind starts making me exhausted at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and reminds me to go get that Diet Coke. Very negative thoughts, very negative activities. And so the way we self-talk is incredibly important. And that's why it's so powerful that when we're seeing things happen around us, we don't know what's going on in many cases, but we start to self-talk about the situation and maybe about the other person or maybe about ourselves. And when we make that negative decision, again, we're probably wrong. And so my hope is that every day when those things happen, I can try to make that positive perception decision. And like any other muscle, this is a continual effort, and not every day does it work. I don't go to the gym every day. I should go more than I do, but sometimes you just make a decision that you're not going to do it that day. And so the same thing happens in this business. It's, even though I preach about this, it's an ongoing effort, an ongoing struggle to make that positive choice all day, every day. And I tell people all the time, because they say, well, yeah, sometimes I just get very negative, or sometimes I get very down, or sometimes, and it's okay. It's okay for those things to happen. Just like it's okay to take a day off, or it's okay to have that Snickers bar on a particular day when you know it's not really in your diet. It's just not okay to live in that place. And so when we know we're there, we just have to make that choice to come back out of that. And so if we're living in that way, and we're using those 4 types of fitness, and we're understanding that our perception is important in what we believe is going on around us, and we understand that this self-talk business is incredibly important and powerful, and we start doing those things, we're training ourselves to live in a place where we go positive instead of negative. And I don't want to take a ton more time here, but I do want to share one other thing that I found to be incredibly powerful as far as this attitude business goes. And that is in 1986, when I joined the military, people were pretty neutral about people in uniform. We were far enough past Vietnam that people weren't negative anymore, but we hadn't been there or done that for a while or done anything. And so they weren't really super pro-military. But in 1989, 1991, we had Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and then we fast forward to 9/11, and the military has been active, for the last 20 plus years of my career. And when 9/11 happened, and we started going, and deploying the National Guard and Reserve and active duty, people became very positive, and they would always approach us and show us appreciation. And it was incredibly powerful when they would come up and do that. I mean, it was somewhat awkward too, because it had never been happening before. But it occurred to me at some point that I had been getting a lot of appreciation, but I hadn't been giving a lot of appreciation. And what I found in making a concerted effort to be a person giving appreciation, not just getting it, is it was almost more fulfilling when I was giving appreciation than it was when I was getting appreciation, because the long-lasting effect of going out of my way to show appreciation was incredibly powerful. And so all these little things, when we start to do them, we put our mind, our subconscious mind and our conscious mind, in a place where we can go positive instead of negative. And by going out of your way, and I have found it to be particularly powerful if I'm having a bad day. And if you ask my wife, I have those occasionally. I don't think I do, but apparently I do. If I'm having a bad day and I can see an appreciation opportunity, and I get myself to step out of my comfort zone and talk to a complete stranger and tell them that they're doing a great job, and tell them that I appreciate them, or whatever it is, it's the change in my mind is unbelievable. And you can kind of tell when you're having that bad day, but when you go out of your way and you see somebody smile, or you can tell you've made a difference, you can tell you've brightened their day, you just walk away from that experience in a better place mentally and emotionally than you were before that interaction. And so when you go through events that are tragic or horrific or whatever it is, and you're dealing with those through life, you deal with them immediately, and then there's triggers along the way, and then there's good days and bad days. And I have found that on bad days, it's incredibly powerful for me to go out of my way to try to make somebody else's day better. And that helps me get into a place where I can start focusing on good, and I can remember good things, and I can see good things because I've done that. And then the last thing I guess I would talk about before we have to take questions is, unfortunately, in the military, I have this whole surviving a death of a loved one is one aspect of surviving, but there's a whole other aspect of surviving, and that is people that are affected by some type of sexual trauma, where rape or an assault or something like that. And unfortunately, and I know it's a dark topic, but we've dealt with some of that in the military, and in leadership roles, we have to be cognizant of that going on, and we have to try to prevent it, but we also have to try to be able to care for the people that happens to. And so the terminology that has become apparent to me is this vicarious trauma. And so if I'm an individual that a person comes to and tells me that they've had a bad experience, then, and I'm taking that information and I'm trying to help that person, then I am in some way living a portion of what that person has gone through. And the more people I take in negativity from, and the negative things that have happened to them, you can't help, it's natural for you to start taking on that negativity. And the clinical term, and I'm not a clinician, I'm not educated in this realm, I'm just have been educated on these things. but the clinical term is vicarious trauma. And that is trauma that you take on from hearing other people's traumatic stories. And as you go through life in this business and you start to try to help others, we all need to be aware that as we hear those stories or as we hear those experiences and as we try to help people, we start taking on some of that traumatic experience. And it's very important. We call it care for the caregiver. So whoever that person is that's taking on that information, that person also needs to be cared for because they're taking on that negativity. And so recognizing that and being willing to ask for help, even though the traumatic experience wasn't your own, taking on those other traumatic experience becomes something that you start living with and dealing with. And then that starts to affect you as an overall in your persona and attitude and things like that. And so I would encourage you, if you're a person that's always helping others, you need to recognize that at some point it's healthy for you to seek some help and find some place that you can kind of reset yourself and do those kind of things as well. I think this is such a powerful, I love the survivor, the acronym for it of serving and being served. And I just think it's so powerful. And so I believe that if we understand our attitude and we understand how that impacts things, having a positive attitude and what we need to put in place to get there can make it more powerful, both in the work that you're doing in this organization, but it makes us better people. And at the end of the day, when we become better at who we are, we become better in everything that we do. And I truly believe if we take these things on and we live with a positive attitude, then we can live in a place where excellence becomes the average in our entire world. So that's kind of my once over the world on attitude and why it's so powerful.
I love that so much. Everything you said resonated with me, and I got a lot of work to do. I feel like I'm a happy, easygoing person, but as you like brought the points out of like thinking about someone in traffic or, you know, someone does something, you know, in public that you think, well, that was against me. Like, what's their problem type of thing. Like, I love that change of mindset. But one thing, so how do we go about attaining these ESPM, or is that right?
Yeah,
ESPM. So like, say I'm not used to like stopping, like you said, that we have that emotion, right? And that's normal. Say, like you said, someone cuts us off or whatever, we have that emotion of like, oh, why, you know, why would they do that kind of thing, like this irking in your heart or whatever. So and that's a normal thing for me, is to like kind of dwell on that. Right. So what would you say, like, how did you, I guess, how do you get yourself to that point of like reminding yourself like, okay, I got to get in this positive mindset, I guess.
Like acknowledging that there's a negative perception or something coming.
Yeah. And then like being able to quickly like change that.
Right. So I think it's as simple, the simple answer is it's a decision, right? You're making a decision now on what you're thinking after that. And the decision is to go positive instead of negative. And so that's training then to get us to do that. And so my strategy is humor. And so when those kind of things happen, so the cutting off in traffic is, I think, a great one because it's happened to everybody, right? And so my strategy for that one is whenever somebody does that to me, especially if we're driving down the interstate or whatever, and you leave that little gap because you don't want to rear end the person in front of you, but apparently it's just wide enough for the car to get in the middle of you. And so my strategy on that is, oh, hey, that guy's in his NASCAR tryout. I hope it goes well for him. You know, so, and it makes me giggle and it kind of works that way. My sister-in-law, her strategy is, oh, I'm going to say a prayer for that guy because he's not going to get home safe. And so, which I also think is kind of, you know, makes me smile. But that's kind of my strategy, is to take what's happening and try to make a joke out of it or make it funny. Or again, because at the end of the day, because I was the same way, I would take it so personally, like that guy cut me off. Yeah. Not just, excuse me, not just made a decision to be a bad driver, but he personally cut me off. And so that was the one thing I had to stop making it personal, make a decision that he doesn't know me. It had nothing to do with me. I'm making it personal. He certainly didn't. And so making the choice to just recognize that if I have this emotion, which I can't control, and then I continue down the road with it, it's going to affect me when I walk in the door and see my family. I'm going to be a different man to my wife and my kids. And so it's simply a choice, and it's practice like everything else, that it's muscle memory of your mental and emotional muscles. And so recognizing it, and then you're going to see, you know, it still happens to me where I'll still go negative and I'll think about it later and I'm like, oh, I made a negative choice. Okay, so I missed that time.
Yeah.
You're not going to be 100% at anything. You could shoot a million free throws, you're still going to miss occasionally. And so
Yeah.
this is the same business, and everything happening around us impacts that too. So if you're listening to talk news radio, the chances of you going positive are less, right? Because you're listening to garbage.
Yeah.
And it's no different than if I walked through your house right now with a can of garbage and I started throwing it around in the house, right? You wouldn't allow that because it has an impact on the house. The
Yeah.
garbage going into our mind has an impact just like that. When we fill it with negativity, we can't allow that. And so it's also a physics lesson, right? Because the mind, even though these teenagers now think they can multitask, and mine certainly do, but you can't, it's impossible to multitask. The human brain can only have one thought at one time. And so it's like physics, right? If you take a rock and drop it in a pail of water, the level of the water goes up because they can't occupy the same space at the same time. The brain's the same way. If I have a negative thought in there, I have to block that thought and replace it with a positive thought, because there's only room for one thought in my mind. So
Yeah.
it's making that choice and then doing something with it.
And I think I just also think about like being a mom to a lot of little kids.
Right.
I can lose my cool sometimes, but like I think it totally relates to that. Like, say my little boy's not listening, but maybe he really didn't hear me, but I get mad at him because he wasn't listening. But really I could assume that he didn't listen, or he didn't hear, sorry. And so it wasn't really like him ignoring me. So, and in just family relationships, like just not, that probably gets a little more complicated though. With family.
Yeah. Then you get into the dynamic of the love and logic and those kind of things. And I do think there's a great deal that I read not that long ago about marriage, right? So, and this guy's analogy was, he's very meticulous about how the cupboards are stacked and the cupboard doors are always closed. And his wife will open the cupboard door, get a coffee cup, go get coffee, but not close the cupboard door. And it drove him crazy. And he was getting angry about it because he felt like she was doing it on purpose. And so his recognition was, okay, if she loves me and she's a loving person, she would never do that on purpose. It's just a horrible habit that I'm letting drive me crazy. And so that's for, an adult thing. And with kids, there is a line between being positive, but still being able to be a disciplinarian, right? And so in the military, if I had to play the role of a leader that had to kind of get after soldiers, I would occasionally get that wasn't very positive of you. Well, sometimes positivity is also telling people the hard truth and doing the hard things and making the hard decisions and those kind of things. So, but how we do that, right? I don't have to scream and holler and throw things, even though that was my strategy when I was a much younger man. But I can still be firm but fair, and I can do it in a positive way instead of negative. And so, and some of it's bad habits that kids or adults have that, and sometimes they are ignoring you. And so, but how we handle it, I think, is based on a lot of things happening around us. And if we're in the practice of making positive choices and going positive instead of negative, or having that positive attitude, we're less likely to get to an extreme that we're not very happy about after the fact. And before I kind of found all this, I wish I could go back and do the first 10 years of raising children over, because I think I would do it very differently. Obviously I don't know because I can't time travel, but it certainly is a practice, and it's fatiguing. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes you're exhausted from trying to live that life. It's just like anything else.
So I want to just maybe, if you don't mind, but take that kind of into a teeny bit deeper level of in a home, or let's say in a grieving situation, even where something is in your face all the time and you can't change it because either the finality of it or the person that you're living with, or whether it be a spouse or child, whatever, isn't interested in changing in that moment. And grief is certainly something that's persistent.
Right.
It never really leaves, it changes, but it's persistent. Where would you see that attitude in that? How would you guide people in that situation to develop that?
To shift.
Yeah, to choose a positivity attitude in those situations where that, good God, I'm waking up to the death of my loved one's still dead, or my spouse is still being a bonehead or whatever, my children are making dumb decisions, like where does that attitude fall into those types of situations?
Yeah, and it really all goes back to the only thing I can control is my attitude, but the only attitude I can control is mine. And so I can't determine how my spouse or loved one or anybody else is going to be in any situation. Certainly, grief on a loss is, that's a whole spectrum of holy cow, trying to, understand how to do that because people grieve so differently. But at the end of the day, I take my belief on attitude, which isn't really my belief, it's a belief that I've learned from way smarter people than me, understanding that only I can control it. I can't control anybody else's, but I also subscribe to the fact that I can lead by example. I can't tell you how to act, but I can show you. And I think it's about the only way that you're going to control somebody else is by being the person that you expect them to be in those situations at some level, right? They have to be their own individual self, but if every day, you can't get dressed and you're moping around and you're doing those things and you're having trouble moving on, and that's driving me crazy because I'm trying to move on, all I can do is continue to do that and support wherever you're at, but show you what I think right looks like in that situation. And then, then it gets into that whole, whenever I'm always very careful when I do this to remind that I'm not a clinician, I'm not a pastor, I'm not any of those things. And so this isn't an expertise based on education, it's on experience and what I've seen and dealt with as far as people go through this, and they're going to go through it in their own ways, but some of it becomes a very scary habitual thing, right? They get stuck in this and they're not, like I said, it's okay to get knocked down in life. It's not okay to stay down because then you're not the type of spouse, parent, friend, aunt, uncle, whatever your role is that you should be. And so that's a huge challenge. And the one thing you can absolutely do is lead by example, live that life the way that you should, support as much as you can without enabling negative behavior, which is a very fine line, and continue to do those things. And then you get into the whole, do they need, professional help? Do they need some type of, medication if it's truly depression or something like that? And so, which is, like you said, it's a whole nother spectrum, but on the surface of attitude, I think it's living the life that you should based on that, trying to support but not enable, and try to go from there.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you. So how is attitude a form of service in your
Yeah, that's a great question. So our attitude is infectious. People are going to catch our attitude. And the best place to see infectious attitude is at the airport. And especially right now, it's always been a great place to see infectious attitude, but they should do a study on the number of people that get their challenges resolved at the airport based on the way they treat the employee that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's almost 100% of the interactions that I watch, and I tend to sit close to the counter because I kind of enjoy seeing these because then I can use those stories when I speak. But the people that come up and thank the person for what they're doing and say, hey, I know there's a lot going on. I'm not sure if you can help me, but if there's any way I could still get to Cleveland by 10 o'clock tonight, those people get help. The person that comes up and makes it that employee's problem, they almost never can help those people. It's just this coincidence, I suppose. But and so what's happening around you, and then watching the people see that interaction happen. Most of them get very uncomfortable, but some of them get energized to become negative as well. And so I truly believe that our interactions every single day are they're either filling somebody's bucket or they're taking out of it. And so if you want to be a servant for good, then being that positive, infectious attitude, to me, you can make people have a better day and you have no idea that you had an impact on that person. But just doing those kind of things, I think is incredibly powerful. And this is a very strange analogy, and it's almost embarrassing to even share it, but it's been so consistent. So I talked a little bit about the appreciation that we've gotten in the military when we're in uniform, and it's just almost overwhelming. It's just crazy. And one of the things people will oftentimes do is if there's a group of soldiers eating together, somebody will pay for our lunch, which is incredible, right? It's incredibly generous. They go out of their way to do that. At the end of my career, I was a one-star general, and I generally am eating lunch with full bird colonels. These people don't need to have somebody buy their lunch. Economically, they can pay for lunch. But I have noticed that when we go into a restaurant, I make it a point. I truly believe when I'm in uniform, I am a billboard for the United States Army. I am out there saying, hey, we got you. And your support of us is making us able to do what we do. I believe that you should look the part. You should make people feel comfortable that that's a soldier that I can depend on. And so I try to be a very positive role model in those situations. And I have a very high level of times that, because other soldiers will say, well, nobody ever buys my lunch and they're super crabby people, those kind of things. And I'm like, well, I'll bet they don't, you know? So just having that positivity, that aura of, and not that I'm not special, right? I'm just trying to do what I believe is right. And so having that, just that positive mojo around you, it seems to make people want to do nice things for you. And so if you're making people feel better, then you're serving people, because then they go home in a better place and they're a better parent, a better spouse, a better loved one, you know, all those things. So I truly believe going through life with a positive attitude is serving others. If people can't figure out, and there's millions of ways to serve, but if you want to serve every single day, then going out in the world with a positive, and I'm an optimist, and some people say, well, that's not realistic. I'm a realist, but truly they're a pessimist. And so everybody can be a realist, but you can be a positive realist or a negative realist. And so that's where they came up with optimist and pessimist. And I don't believe great things are going to happen all the time, but I don't always think the sky is falling. And so I think when you're out there being like that, it's infectious, and people start to be a little more positive when they're around you. And some days, on bad days, I try to go find those positive people that I know are going to lift me up and fill my cup. And so I truly believe that that's a great way to serve.
I love that. So just recently I was stuck in the Dallas airport for a whole day. And in the end, I had to turn around and come home just because I was going to run a race and I wouldn't be able to make it. So, but the stress level in myself was very high. There was hundreds of people that this was happening to.
Oh.
And then at the end of the day at 6 o'clock, it was like they closed all the restaurants. And there was like one or two that were open, and I found like the last one that was open, and there was some to-do going on with the employee, and she was yelling like that something wasn't paid for. And then there was this guy just standing to the side, so calm, smiling the biggest smile, and just like, she must have had a really bad day. Like, let's try to like, like just assuming like, okay, she's having a really hard time. This has been a stressful day for everyone. But it helped her, like she was kind of snapped her out of it, even though she was really still stressed, but it kind of snapped her out of it, and then helped me calm down, because I was already so stressed, and I come upon this lady that's gonna maybe serve me food, and then there was this other lady, and she's like, I guess she had some kind of pass for something, like maybe she said, I'll give you my free pass for something. And because she was just so grateful that he like calmed the storm and really gave us all an example of like having that good attitude. And, so I was really appreciative of him, because I could have,
Right.
at that point of the day, I was ready to just lose it. But I was really grateful for his example of just, everyone's stressed out, and I'm going to just see the good and try to calm the storm.
That's a fantastic story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just, as we conclude, I'm just going to share my brief little airport. So I ran in memory of John Candy recently. He was I didn't have anybody, so I just looked up, and John Candy, and he's somebody that I've always thought is hilarious, just incredible. But I was watching with the kids and watched the airport scene in Home Alone, where she is doing exactly what you're talking about. She's freaking out because her child's at home, whatever, and the airport guy's just looking at her. I'm sorry, I can't do it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. And here comes John Candy over to the side, and and all he does is offers a positive, and she immediately is changed to freaking out to giving him a big old hug. And
Right.
so
we just need more people like that. So we should make it a goal to be that person, right?
no, I
the
think
the impact is incredible.
I think that's great. And on that note, I was thinking, as you were speaking of your stoplight scenario, the absence of you honking your horn, even if we want to go to maybe some unknowns, I'm willing to wager drastically changed that guy's day, Because if he was whatever situation we might want to speculate in, and he starts getting somebody behind him laying the horn on him, that's going to, maybe he is going to a traumatic situation. Maybe he was just, but that's not going to do anything but crank his
Right.
levels of unemotional health even, worse. It's going to make things
Right.
worse. And I think that's one of the things that serve us vicariously through attitude. We don't know where people are, rarely, as you alluded to. And by that same reasoning, we don't know all of the people that are being affected by our positive attitude, or by choosing to live our life with an attitude that's giving good as opposed to giving out negative. So I think that's fantastic. And there's a gentleman we had on here 3 weeks ago. He lost a set of his twins in an accident, and his dedication, his resolve now in life is he is every day committing to try and live in a way that honors these individuals. He says, if I put good in, I'm getting good out. If I put bad in, I'm getting bad out. And so I thought that fits very well with what you're saying with that attitude. And that's really what's clicked for him, is he's found a way, and it's his coping method for sure. It's one of his styles of dealing with grief. But I really like that, putting good in, I'm getting good out, and putting bad in, I'm getting bad out. So
Yeah,
well,
you referenced in the very beginning Day of Excellence, and I will just I'll throw a plug in, of course, because it's on April 27th of this year, and it's going to be a fantastic event. But that event came to fruition based on, way back before I really was all in on all of this stuff, and before I was even doing a lot of professional speaking, this idea of having just a day where you could go and get personal and professional development, not about a specific thing that you do or a specific industry, but just making us better at who we are so we can be better in all we do. And that idea was in my head for 10 years. And I ended up with a group of volunteers going through a leadership program here in Rapid City. And I threw that idea out to that group, and that group they latched onto that, and they made it what it is today, which is, we're having our 11th annual. It should be our 13th. We had 2 years without it because of COVID. But it truly is just a day where you come in and there's 4 speakers, 4 professional speakers. Each one does a 1-hour keynote. And it's all about the things that we deal with and how we become better, whether it's communication or whether it's our attitude or whether it's, using humor as that mechanism to deal with the bad things that are happening, and the perspectives and the things that they have brought forth. And we have had, in the 10 years that we've had it, we've had over 15,000 people attend that event. And so when you talk about putting good in and getting good out, the people that come to that, they just rave about how they felt when they left. And some of it is because we give them 20-minute breaks in between the speakers so they can network and use the facilities, whatever. A lot of them talk about that being the most powerful part of that, because the energy is infectious, which we talked about. And so just being around people, and they buy a ticket, they pay for a ticket to come to this event. So truly they want to be there. And so that whole atmosphere of that day to me that's about filling your bucket back up, right? I mean, that whole day is spent taking on things that, now it can get a little overwhelming, and you can say things like, I have a lot of work to do. But at the end of the day, it's just an opportunity for mental and emotional fitness that doesn't exist in a lot of other places. And so I'm incredibly proud to have been part of the group that started that. I'm even more proud of the people around me that made it so much more than I ever would have imagined it being. And so that, to me, I wish we could replicate that in other places and share that with more people. It's incredibly powerful, because everybody's going through something at some level.
Yeah.
And so to have a day where you can come in and remind yourself that there's ways to go through those things, and there's ways to cope or to deal with those in a positive manner, it's just incredibly powerful. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Joshua.
yeah, for sure.
Yes, and I will vouch for it. I've been to it and it's absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
I'm
Thank
going to do something that we've never done before, but I just want to remind everyone about his book. And if you comment on how attitude has affected your life, we're going to pick someone and send them a book. So
awesome.
I just think it's so important.
And I'll make sure that it is hand signed by the general.
Done deal. Absolutely. We can do that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I'm so inspired tonight, and I'm just ready to make some changes. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. It was my pleasure to be here. I appreciate it very much. What an honor. Thank you.
So let's see if we can do this professionally.